Thank you everybody for attending our webinar today on the new features in CU4. Jeff Sewin is your presenter today, and he is going to review all those great new features, and we will open Q&A at the end of the session. Jeff?
What we're going to go through today is SL 2018 CU4. It is available. It is available now for you to download and start implementing. We're going to go through kind of, if you heard my presentation before, we're going to go through a lot of the standard things. We'll talk a little bit about Lifecycle. We'll go through all the features. We'll talk about this in a second, but SL 2018 is different. We're releasing features roughly every 6 months. We'll go through all the things that have happened. We're going to stay at a high level talking about some of our other areas, Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate. I'm actually going to cut those sections down a little bit shorter this time just because we keep on adding features, so we keep on making this section shorter and shorter. But I will touch high level the benefits of those areas as well as our web apps, and then get to our roadmap, what's coming in the next release of SL 2018 CU5. So we'll touch those at a very high level. If you have any questions during this time, please feel free to type them into the question pane and we will address them as we have time, as I'm going to make sure we do have time to address them today. So first, where are we in the SL lifecycle? Hopefully this is nothing new to you. SL 2018 is in mainstream support. That means that we continue, if we get hot fix requests, we can address them because it's a product that's in mainstream support. That also means that you get year-end updates. This year, we see that there's always a chance for more things, but we know there's some changes that we've had to make already, and we're going to be making them at the end of the year around year-end updates. So definitely a very good reason to be on SL 2018 is to get those. If you're on SL 2015, 2011, or earlier, 2015 and 2011 are in extended support. So the big difference there is that there will be no hot fixes. So if you happen to find something that needs to be updated, unless it's data corrupting, it's not going to get addressed. And there are no year-end updates that are provided by Microsoft. So if you need something outside there might be some potentials to talk to Val about that, but that's just to let you kind of know on that area. So again, hopefully you've seen this a million times. If not, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll give you my email address as I go through if you happen to have any questions about what you're seeing here. All right, so let's get into the features. What are the big things? How do I know I'm in 2018? I've probably said this a million times, but you can tell you're in 2018 because we've gone back to the different style of one color icons. Can't tell you why. We've got the new D for Dynamics, so the new Dynamics logos opposed to the old sales. And then you can see now we are in one color icon. So that kind of gives you that understanding of where you're at. What are some of the features? Well, probably the biggest one that you've heard me talk about, the biggest change that we've started to make in the product is around the idea of setting up approvals. And this is in the financial area. So we've kind of had it in other areas like project and requisitions, but this is a new way to do approvals. And this first one is through the voucher and adjustment entry screen. Why did we do it? Well, the idea came about when people said, hey, listen, Jeff is my data entry person. He does a great job of doing voucher and adjustment entries. Sometimes he, messes up. So Valerie, as my manager, says, hey, listen, all I want to do is I want to have it so Jeff does the data entry. I am the head, and I want to be able to view what he's done. So I want to be able to review that so we can set up an approval process. So that's the impetus, is that we want to segregate duties. Jeff is data entry, Val is approving, and then we want to make sure everything is great. Obviously, having the voucher adjustment entry screen items correct means less work for us down the road. So how does it happen? Initially, back when 2018 released, when you would go into the voucher adjustment entry screen with this feature turned on, you would see a new option here that said submit for approval. Now, if you were to try to choose something like release now, release later, it would go ahead and give you this message. I'm sorry, you can't release it because it has to be approved. Now remember, this is something you turn on or off. You don't have to turn it on. So if you don't want to have it on, it will not be on and everything will work as it does. As we move forward, so the only action that you can do is submitting it for approval. Now I will go down a rabbit hole real quick. We've had suggestions from people that said, hey, listen, why put any of those other doc handling options? And actually here with CU4, we've removed a lot of these other option. So the only thing you can do is submit it for approval, just to make it less confusing for people. And we got great feedback and have made adjustments to this feature over the life cycle here of 2018. So we appreciate that, and hopefully that makes sense to people as well. So after I go ahead and I submit it for approval as my doc handling, I click finish, and it's going to go ahead and automatically submit it for approval. So it is being submitted for approval. The new status is W, meaning it is waiting. It is waiting to either be approved, rejected, but it is in that waiting state. When it's in that waiting state, it can be approved in one of three ways. The first way, the approver can come right into the voucher adjustment entry screen, open up the actual batch, and start looking at it. Now, when they come into the screen, they could go document by document, opening up each reference number one at a time and choosing to approve or reject each specific document. That is possible, or you can review them all and then choose to only approve or reject once and do it at the header. So those are your two options as far as approving on this particular screen. Now, as an important note here, as an approver, you pretty much have the uber power here to say whether everything is good or not, obviously to approve or reject. And you could, for example, let's say in the second line item here, we notice that the sub account for 03 is incorrect. You have an option. You can either go in as the approver, make the adjustment and approve it, or you can choose to reject it and let Jeff know that he needs to go and make an adjustment because that sub account happens to be incorrect. Again, preference of the person, of the company, but again, giving you that power to do what you need. Again, you can, if you decide to approve it, it will default a value in there, or you can type in information in this reasons area as well. So once it does get approved, then Jeff can open up and say, oh, there's my approved entries, and then everything works as it does for him. And usually, releasing now, releasing later, if he's got the access to do that, he can move forward with that process. Now, I said there are three ways you could approve. So there are two other ways. Well, the first way is that we can approve via email. One of the solutions that we've talked about later is a solution called Power Automate. Now, Power Automate allows you to send emails. It can be used for approvals. It can be used for notifications. It can be actually used to transfer data. It's a very, very powerful tool that's available from Microsoft. In this particular example, we can take advantage of the approval process inside of Power Apps. So what this is I have it set up to automatically at a certain time. It lets me know, again, here's the date, the time, there's a batch out there, here's the total amount of the batch, here are the vendors that are involved in it, and then if I have to be logged into SL, I can actually go ahead and choose to approve and click on that item, choose to click on this link and go right to that document and look at it if you need more information on it. So you can do that right there. So that's great. I can view that information. It gets sent to me in email. It's important because a lot of us are remote now. I don't need to log into SL. I can do it all remotely. I can choose to approve or reject. I can write a reason why I approve or why a reason I reject it, and then take action on this particular item. Now, the benefit of this process as well is that the thing I like about it is if I go ahead and choose to approve, that email itself changes. It doesn't sit there saying, hey, would you like to approve? Would you like to reject? The actual email changes to what you see on the screen. Hey, it got approved. So questioning, what did I do with that? Did I approve it? Did I forget to approve it? I like it because it automatically updates the email, and now it looks, oh, okay, it's approved. Perfect. Now I can go ahead and move forward with it. All right. Now, like everything, Power Automate actually has a app for that. So you could actually use their Power Automate app to view a little bit of lesser information, but be able to do that same process through an app or through an email. Now, the third and final way to do it is we've created something called a Power App. All right, Power Automate. What is that, Jeff? That's getting notifications, approvals, transferring data. Power App, think of Power App is really built around the idea is that do you have a simple task that you'd like someone to be able to do, but you don't want them to have to log into SL? And so think of it as a task-oriented item. Are there people who just need to be able to get into SL to update these three fields when something changes? Well, instead of letting them have to get into SL and you having to set up and let them have access to it, how about a quick Power App that gives them access to the fields that you only want them to have access to, allow them to make adjustments and move forward. And that's where Power Apps kind of come into play. Now, what we've done here and included in SL 2018 CU4 or CUs is the ability to view this approval status of our batches. So at first, the idea was that we wanted to create an app that allows you to, anytime you can see, well, what's going on with my batches? Have they been approved? Are they waiting to be approved? Who's looked at them? So at first, it started off as just an app to be able to view your statuses, and then it became very apparent that, hey, wait a second, while I'm in here, why can't I just go ahead and approve things as well or reject them? So that's really kind of where it was built around. We can go ahead and open up a specific batch, and I told it it's that history idea, so we can see where it's at, open a line item and see, okay, this is kind of a boring vendor batch, but there's only one vendor in this entire batch. But again, if you had multiple, you could view them all and see the different information, and then see exactly who needs to approve it. We've got 2 approvers that are set up. Right now, no one's approved it. And we can also quickly jump and look at another batch. So we'll jump over and look at another one. This one actually has some action on it. It actually has been approved, and it appears right here. If you see at the top, it is waiting for a second approver. So if we click on that, we can actually get more details. Yep, approver 1 has approved it, and approver 2 needs to look at which that person's ID happens to be approver test 2. So you have that ability to see that information. We also have the ability to go in and say, you know what, you talked about the idea of the Power Automate process would send emails at certain times. What this process allows us to do is say, hey, listen, maybe someone just put in a request, and the way that Power Automate rules is written is generally you say, I want every day at this time or these times of the day, I want something to be sent. This kind of allows you to override this. This allows you to come in and say, hey, look out there for anything that's been submitted in the last hour or 2 or many time, and hit send. And if anything has happened in those last couple hours, I want you to grab it and send that email out because we need to get this thing addressed. So along with being able to look at your history, it allows you to approve things, but it also allows you to invoke the approval emails to people without you having to go in and figure out how to do that manually. So a great bit of feature as well. Last but not least, you can use this app to approve, which is the last part here. So we can look at our statuses. It looks to see, do you have the ability to approve? And if you do, it will turn on these buttons to allow you to approve and reject it. We can choose to approve it, click on yes, and say, yep, this is a go. So how does this get set up? Well, in the approval maintenance screen, you can see we've got our voucher adjustment entry screen. We can set it up for all companies, or each specific company can be different, and you get to turn on the approval either by approving by a group or by a user. Now you can set up just 1 approver, or you can set up 2. You can set up to be done by a group, meaning whoever gets to it first approves it, or we can do it by a specific user. So you have a lot of flexibility around the ability to set up those approvals. So obviously, big item. Obviously, hopefully you guys can see the benefit of that, and we'll talk about where else this is showing up here in a couple of slides later. The next, one of the things that we added in SL 2015 was the ability to do searches on your fields, where you could choose the actual column name, you could do a search. And all of our searches in 2015 changed to what we call a contains clause. Now, what does that mean? So that means when I type in ON, it in the name field where the value ON is, and it says, oh, I'm going to display anybody that contains the value ON. And you can see in this example, that's exactly what it's doing. Well, but prior to that, in 2011 and earlier, when you would do a search, it was really doing a search based on the first letter. So basically what begins with these values. So if I do what begins with, it's the value T, and now it's showing me any name that starts with the value T, whether it's the phone company, Trey Research, and so forth. So that's the way it was, and basically what people came back to us after 2015 and said, you know what, I understand contains is pretty powerful, but the way we did things, we really like that begins with, can we have that option? And that's what we've done. We've added it onto the screen. You can flip-flop between the two. There's no closing and reopening of the screen. It gives you full flexibility to search the way that works best for you in that particular situation on that particular screen. And what we've added is a way to set, hey, Jeff is a contains person, Val is begins with person. We can actually go in here in the user maintenance screen and have our administrator set it up what the default setting will be when we open up our screens. Not a requirement, but a nicety if that's going to make your life easier. Now, put a pin in this one. You might be saying to yourself, Jeff, someone has to go into the user maintenance and set it up. Wouldn't it be better if the end users could set up what their default was? And I'm going to say you are correct. And you'll hear in a couple slides later, in a couple later releases, we've actually added that. And I'll reference that here in a little bit later. All right, a lot of project enhancements. Obviously, we focus a lot on project because that's where a lot of our customer base is. What we did here is an idea around printing invoices. There are two different types of invoices, preliminary and final invoices that can be printed. And a common request is that, hey, a lot of times I just want to be able to print out this invoices that say there are multiple ones. And a lot of times a file, not everything is printing out to a printer anymore. That's kind of the way it used to be. We want to print it out to a PDF, and then we want to be able to share that with people. So with that in mind, we've created these functionalities that allows you to automatically say, hey, I want to save it here locally on a drive. I want to put it on a SharePoint site, which is what we call DocShare, but that's a SharePoint site for my manager or a SharePoint site for that project. And the benefit here is I can put them out there, send an email and say, hey, go ahead out there, check the SharePoint site for you as a manager or for this project. They can view them and give me the feedback. And the same idea with printing out your final invoices. You can have that out there for them to review and see the finals as well. So great enhancement request and being able to add that out there. Now the next kind of big change came around the vendor maintenance screen. Now customers in the customer maintenance screen have been able to be inactive for since I can remember the product's been around, but for some reason we didn't have this idea with the vendors. You could kind of put them on hold, but this inactive idea was a little something people said hold was okay, but we want to make it a little bit more restrictive. And that's where this inactive idea came from. So what does inactive mean? Well, at a very high level, it means the most common things to think about it, no new purchase orders. Make that vendor inactive. If Jeff is our vendor and we want to stop doing any new purchase orders or putting him to inactive, we'll start it right now, no new purchase orders. Secondly, no new voucher adjustment entries can be made. So we're not going to be able to pay for those purchase orders and those checks, no checks. So it really kind of stops everything in its tracks. And there's probably a good reason for it, but again, it allows us to turn them off. Now, it also does mean more than this. It means that when we do things and we go to set them up, we're going to check. We're going to check and make sure some of these things that are vendors that can be set up as default values or vendors who have purchase orders, we're going to warn you before you make that vendor inactive. So if I make that vendor inactive, it's going to say, oh, by the way, I'll let you do it, but there's 5 purchase orders that are sitting out there with that vendor on them. So you might want to, take a look at that. There are certain situations we won't let you make them inactive, where a vendor has been set up as a default value in another screen. We don't want that to be there. We want you to take the time to go out and remove them from there before you go ahead and make them inactive. Now, I talk about the big levels, which is obviously no new POs, no new checks and payments. Here are just a couple of the other screens this impacts. This means no new entries of that vendor into any of these screens. So just a couple places, but again, it gives you great flexibility. Now, a key point here is inactive does not mean that we're going to automatically delete anything in the database. It literally is going to just keep us from doing anything new with them. Please note that if I make Jeff inactive today, at the time I can make him active moments later. If things get turned around, I can make him back to being active again, and we are good to go. So don't think it is a deleting or cutting off or getting rid of things. That is very flexible and being able to be turned on and off as needed. The next one is kind of just a highlight around the feature that we've always had, the ability in the journal transaction screen to reversing and correcting batches. One of the issues that we had with it is that when you were doing that and it was involving a project entry, so if you're in the journal transaction screen, you're trying to make adjustments to projects, unfortunately, they didn't flow back into the project information correctly. So a credit inside of the general journal screen would become a negative to the project, a debit would become a positive. Well, that's kind of backwards and just the way that things were originally written up. So we've gone ahead, gotten the feedback, and now this means that you can use these screens to adjust things for projects and know that it's going to flow back into the project correctly. All right, the next one is around travel and expense reports. So in a lot of companies, like the one I work for, one of the requirements you have is that when you submit your expense report, you need to include a copy of your receipt so they can see that this is real. So obviously, when it comes to an approver can look at it and say, yep, thank you for doing everything, approve it. And the way that you know it works, if you're on the web and you're doing your expense entry, that attachment of your receipt flows right into this travel and expense report screen inside of Dynamics SL. Now, the thing to note is that what would happen is if I was or Val was my approver, she approved my expense and then didn't really take the time to look and see that I forgot to put in my expense reports and I forgot to attach them. When it came into the screen, once it got past a certain status, the accounting people would say, hey, listen, you're missing receipts, and there's no way they could actually add it on to make them be in compliance. So we've basically edited the screen, edited the code behind it to say, hey, let those icons be always that are highlighted in red, make them always be enabled so we can attach things whenever we need to. So again, a common request that makes a lot of sense, and basically listening to them and making those enhancements. Another one is an enhancement we did to the homepage feature, which we've had in the system for a couple releases. The idea is here is I can display any web page. In this case, I'm showing you an example of showing customer source right inside of SL so you can keep on top of the latest things. And if you were to go to customer source today, you'd see SL 2018 CU4 is available now. So just as an update. So what did we do? Well, we've updated the code behind this to make it work with more modern web pages, which if you were working with older ones, it would have some limitations, but as long as you're on a machine that has the latest versions of web browsers, it'll be able to do much better in viewing this information. And to just help promote this to our administrators is that the way that those home pages are set up can be done right through this user maintenance setting. And what we did is we set it up so if you put a value in here, let's say you have an internal intranet site that you want everyone to see and use as their homepage. For the administrators, we've added the ability to take that information and clicking this new homepage copy to button, you can then copy that information to users, to groups, and so forth. Again, it's just a way to help promote that feature to make it easier for admin to start pushing out this functionality. All right, so we've talked about SL 2018 and SL 2018 CU1. Those are the features that came out in there. Just a couple. So let's get going here. We're going to talk about CU2 and what are the things that happened in CU2. The first thing that we added was one of the big features that people love is Dynamics SL's quick query screen. Great screen, allows you to view information, a way to find the data opposed to having reports, run reports. And what we did is we were very lucky to find some consultants that work with Dynamics SL and talk to them about what are some of the quick queries that you use a lot, and are you okay with us distributing this out to the community? And they said, yep, we are very excited to provide this to you, and we're very happy because we think these are queries that will really help. Now, these are definitely obviously project focused, but one of the things that's great about Dynamics SL is its extensive and flexible way that you can set up your projects and set up your allocations and set up all the different things that you need. And that's obviously one of the things that draw people to SL is it really can be, you can make it as complex as you need or as simple as you need, and SL can handle both. And that's really one of the big benefits of SL. So what these are, not to get too deep off of this, is that these are queries that you can run. The first one says, hey, if I'm about to run the allocation process, tell me what would be allocated if I ran it right now. And that gives you kind of like, hey, show me what should be processed. Now, if I run the allocation, this is what's going to happen. The next two say, if you run allocation, show me what was the results. So now you can see the results of the allocations with the next one. So again, we're seeing what was before, what happened, what would happen, what happened after it. So everything ticks and ties there. And then also here can looking at the billing transaction load analysis, see what's eligible to be billed, and then the financial transaction transfer. If I were to run FTT, what were the items that would be involved in that process? So a lot of these are either pre-running process or post-running processes that make sure things happen the way you want. Now, if you find some things that, hey, why is that not showing up? Why did that not happen? Then a lot of times it would come down to you taking a look at your setup to see, hey, oh yeah, you're right, I didn't set that up exactly the way I wanted it. So big shout out to the consultants that helped us provided those things. The thing about it is now you have that included in the core product, so you as a customer can do that self-assessment and looking into the things that are going on. All right, the next one came in as a very simple request, and I think became a very powerful request. The idea behind this is that on the GL release batch screen, if the idea is that Jeff is putting all his batches into the screen, but he's not releasing them, when I am someone to look at the batches that are out there, it would be really great if I could see what's important to me. One of the fields that became important is period to post. Did Jeff accidentally fat finger and put in 2025? If he did, I'd like to go to one screen where I can see all the batches and not have to open them up one by one and view them. That's exactly what the screen does. So now we added this feature. Now what we took a step further is they said, now, if he did put it in 2025, I don't want to have to open up the original screen and make an edit. Can I edit it here? And the answer is yes. So we've added the ability for initialize mode for you to be able to come in here, edit this, change it from 2025 to 2004 in this particular case. And then when we release the batch from that screen and we open it up, we say, hey, everything got written back correctly and my batch posted to the right screen, to the right period, sorry. So that's the great thing about it. We've a great simple idea that kind of build off of itself, a great idea for an enhancement, and now we've got the information that we need. The next one was a little bit around me, a little bit around the people who has to work. One of the things with doing time entry and Microsoft Dynamics SL is that you need to tell us what your week dimensions are. Is it a week, 7 days? Is it 2 weeks, multi-week? What are all the different ways you can set up your time periods? You actually go in and set those up. Now, when you come into the screen, you might say, hey, Jeff, what was originally on here? Well, if you look below the begin processing button, that whole grid there was out there and you had to manually type it in over and over and over again. And sometimes you mess up and the screen doesn't always work well with you when you start typing it incorrectly. But it was just a grid. Now, what I said is I do demos, and when I do demos, I do them a lot of times for time entry. And when I'm talking to a customer, I'll talk to them, well, what are you doing? Weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, what are you doing? And I'll try to set it up on my system based on their needs, so then I can kind of show them the reality of how it would work. So what we've done is we've added this whole upper section here that you see on the screen. That's all brand new. Now, the idea behind it is that you come in, you open up the screen, tell me what day do you want me to start creating new time periods for you for, what's the end date, and what time periods. We can tell all that information. We hit the begin processing button, and it says, okay, based on what you just told me, I've created these time card periods. And what we're doing is we're creating it in a kind of a work area. So it's showing me, yep, these are all the fields. This is what I heard you tell me. The nice thing about it is if you look at it, now you can make edits if you see anything obvious that's wrong. Now, generally, obviously, most of those fields are gonna be right. The only place I could really see you making any edits potentially would be in the salary factor, how you decide to do things when they come to the end of the month and it's breaking over, the end of the month is not a Friday, it's a Tuesday or whatever it happens to be. What are you gonna do with that? And this allows you to do that. Now, once I say okay, then it automatically copies that into there. I'm done. It's available. And this is really great. I've seen customers who do this at the beginning of the year and do the entire year. I know people who say, you know what, we don't want people in ahead, so we only do it, 2 weeks at a time, or we do it the month ahead. This really makes that whole process easier for them. All right, the next area is around end date validation. So you see highlighted at the very top, there's a start date and an end date for every project that's in the system. Now, interestingly enough, those are strictly informational. When's my start date? When's my end date? Sometimes we really don't know what those things are. Sometimes we do. So you have the ability, there's a new field under it called end date validation. And what end date validation, you can set it to none, which means it's gonna work the way it does prior to this release. And then project level and task level. Now, what does that mean? Well, at a project level, what it means is that if today is after the end date of your project, then that project's going to stop showing up in this case, and for me to be able to do my time and expense entry. So no longer, we said it was cutting off, can no longer do it, we're done. At a task level, this gives you a little bit more flexibility because you might say, all right, This task, you could even get it to, I'm going to create a task for June. And then at the end of June, no one can put their time against it. I'm going to create a task for July, put the end date of July, and so forth. So you can actually do it at a task level, so the project keeps on showing up, but the tasks start disappearing from you being able to do time entry against them because you've passed that certain date. So that's, to me, I love that functionality. There's the nice thing about it, again, you set it up in the project maintenance screen, and then it impacts these screens inside of the rich client, time entry, time card detail, being able to do expense for time and travel and expense reports entry. All the screens that are doing with time and expense will be impacted by that feature being turned on. Also, it's been added to web apps. So 2018 web apps also looked to that field to decide whether a project or a task is available. So great functionality. The nice thing about it is that you can set that up once and you don't need to worry about going in and turning things off at a later time, which is possible. You can turn those features off and be able to turn them off. This way you set up and actually have that end date actually do something for you. Next is invoice and adjustment posting in the project world. Forever, it's always been the ability to select things based on the sub account, the billing currency, the biller, just those things above the red line were always there. We got some requests that says, hey, sometimes I just want to be able to hit the select project and choose multiple projects that I want, or select invoice and adjustment entries that are out there. Again, something that we've never had before, something that someone came out with a great request for that, and we were able to add that to the product. All right, giving a little love to our service people. One of the ideas out there is that the way the screen was written, as soon as you do a service call, if I was doing a service call at your house, it locks in the fact that I'm going to your house and that's what we're doing our service call for. But if you're doing a quote and someone says, hey, I'm going to do a quote for somebody, I might not know exactly what location, especially if you're working with a larger customer that has multiple sites. So this allows me to change the site ID while I'm in quote mode. So I can go in here and choose another address. So it chooses the other address, it loads into the screen, and allows me to change it around while I'm still in that quote mode, which makes complete sense. A great request and an enhancement for our service people. All right, so that's CU2. Let's jump to CU3. CU3 added the capabilities of what we talked about earlier. Someone came to me after one of these presentations and said, I like the fact that you can set up begins with or the contains clause, but my admin, I don't need to go to him to set it up. Can't I just do it myself? So we've done exactly that. So with this options dialog, it allows me to go into the drop-down box, choose my option dialog, hit the application, and now I can choose whether I want to use the contains or begins with, and it saves it back to the same place. It's just you don't need to have access to those screens to make those changes. So a great example, a nice feature that's been enhanced by great input from our customer base. All right, the next that was big in CU3 was the journal transaction entry approval. Wait a second, this sounds familiar. Yes, it is. We took the approval process and we moved it over to the journal transaction screen. So all the things that we talked about are in here. The ability to turn on the approvals. If someone tries to submit it or release it before approving it, it's going to give them that standard message. And then we can go ahead and have them go through the approval process. I'm not going to go through all those steps again, but again, at a very high level, how do you approve the journal transaction? You can go back into the journal transaction screen itself and choose to approve it as an approver. You can do it through email, as we talked about earlier, and you can do it through the app. So there's an app, an email, and similar to what we did. So that same great feature added to another screen. I think great results for that as well. So that's what we have here with CU4. Now, just to prove it's real, you can see that the approval screen is set up now that not only can you do it for voucher adjustment entries, you can also do it for journal transactions as well. And you have that same flexibility. Is it for all companies? It's different for each company. Is it a group that approves? Is it a user approves? You have that flexibility. And just like we talked about the great features of that whole being able to release your GL batches, we've added that same functionality to the release AR batch, as well as the release AP batch. Again, a good idea. We've gotten feedback. We made adjustments to it in GL. People liked it. So we've moved it to other places where we think it can be beneficial to the customers. And so far, so good. The next, people love the end date validation. They love the fact that it's something you can set up so that if you don't, technically you can go into a project and turn it off as you want willy-nilly, but the fact that we were using some type of end date that really made sure that they knew that things were going to be taken care of, really, really liked that. So they said, hey, we see that you're only doing it in the project time and expense entry. Can we expand that into other areas of the product as well? Can we expand this to AP, AR, and GL? And that's exactly what we've done. We've added the checkboxes that you see on the screen so you can turn on where this is going to be. We talked about this already, but what does this mean? What touched in GL, AP, AR? Well, the journal transaction screen, that means when we go past that end date, that project or that task will not show up once it gets past that date. The same with the voucher adjustment entry, and the same with the invoice and memo. So you can see just taking a good idea, getting good feedback, good items, and we kind of plan this one out to be able to expand it into other areas of the project as well. All right, so that was CU3. Lots of great things there. So why you're all here probably is, what did you do in CU4, Jeff, and what can we look forward to going from there? All right, so the first one is around accounts receivable and the application inquiry and reversal screen. You may be used to it, maybe you may not, but we had a customer come up to us in the last 6 to 8 months and said, hey, listen, one of the things that we run into is that when we're doing the reversing's, which can be for a payment, prepayment, when you currently do a reversal, if the entry was made, let's say last period or several periods ago, if I go to do the reversal today, it's going to post that to the current date and the current period, which some people are used to, but a lot of people say, I would have rather liked it to go back to the original period and the date that it was entered and have the entry go back into that time period. So we heard, and that's what we've done. So there's a new checkbox that's on the screen. Again, clicking on it will again post it back to the original date and the original period to post. Leave it turned off and it does it just exactly as it has always done and does it to the current period and date. But again, we wanted to add that functionality because we thought it made a lot of sense. It's something that's been this way forever, but again, a great request and something that we thought made sense that could really help our customers out. So now, again, you have this new checkbox that allows you to put it back. Again, these are the things that we look for, the great enhancements, because we're not changing the entire process. We're tweaking the things that we know that have maybe been that way forever, but it doesn't mean they have to continue to be that way. So that's, and I'll tell you in a second how I want to get your feedback on these type of items, because these are the ones that I think that for those people that are using these screens, that it makes a big difference to them. It's going to make a big difference to be able to post this back into the where you really wanted it to, not where it's currently going. And the second one, it might sound very, very simple, but it's a nice message to let someone know what's going on in the system. And what is that? Well, there is a process that's been out there forever, sales orders and purchase orders. How do we tie them together? So there's the ability to create be in a sales order and create a purchase order for those items because maybe you don't have them in the system. So for example, I'm out there and I've got these 2 inventory items and I know I don't have them in stock. So I can have it go out and click on the PO button. And there's a couple different ways I can auto create it, do it as a drop ship or as a manual. But the result here is I can have a purchase order created for me for these 2 line items. Now the big deal about it is that it's got a different purchase for time. It says goods for sales order, meaning that these goods, when they come in, are going to be earmarked for this particular sales order. So when Process Manager runs, it knows, oh, yep, this PO came in, these are going to assign to this guy and we're going to let him use it, and that's the person who's going to use it. So great functionality if you haven't heard of it. Now you do. Now, a very simple request came to me, said, Jeff, what happens a lot of times is that people will not realize that that sales order is tied to a purchase order. And so what happens is a lot of times people come in and go, oh, I'm deleting that line, and not understand that when they delete that line, they've kind of orphaned that purchase order line, because that purchase order line is saying, hey, I need to go into that sales order. Well, if I delete you off my sales order, there's nowhere for you to go. So what we've done, it's very, very simple. If you're in here and you try to delete a line that's been tied to a purchase order, very simple. Hey, the sales order line is associated to a PO line, and the connection will be lost if you remove the PO line. Do you want to continue? Oh, it is? Oh, okay. And they can click the PO button and see it. And in some cases, they might say, you know, yes, I do. I have to. Thanks for letting me know. I'll go, when I receive the purchase order, I'll go put it back, the inventory back into general inventory and use it. Thanks for the information. But a lot of times the basic request is like, hey, people are losing and not understanding what they're doing. If we were to let them know, then they'd probably say no and maybe change it, or they might still say yes, but at least they know, okay, yeah, we need to go take a look at that inventory and make an adjustment and move it back. So very simple, love it. It fits a purpose, it fits a need, and now these people who are using this will be able to be notified. All right, the next one is it might not sound big, but it is for all of my service series people. One of the abilities is that when you had a service call, if you inverse a service call incorrectly, today the way to reverse it and do it and so forth is a lot of manual processing. The request basically came down is that, can you at least give me some buttons to help me redo some of this? So there's a button that will reverse an invoice if you put it in and realize, oops, that's not right, I need to redo that. So there's a button to do that. And then once I reverse it, give me a button to copy that original items over and let me make edits and changes so I don't have to start from scratch. So that was the request. And so there are 2 new buttons. If this is a call that's been completed, then it is considered and it's been invoiced, then the invoice journal button will be available to you. So you click the button and do the reversal. Now, note when you reverse a journal, you still need to go through the process because there's some underlying code where you have to process it and print it as a reversal and get rid of it and apply it and everything. You still need to do that. But then when you bring it up, now you'll have this new button called copy invoice that says, hey, do you want to copy everything out there into a new invoice so you can start working on it so you don't have to start from scratch? And so that button is in there as well. Very big item. I had a very long, in-depth conversation with the service person. They explained to me the pains. We went back and forth on some designs and came up with this kind of this first kind of attempt to assist them with this process, and it went very, very well. And so very excited to have that feature added to the system as well. Now the next came about because of our work with Power Automate, and we'll talk a little bit more here because of a little bit later because I kind of hit a couple slides later. But what Power Automate allows us to do is to notify you of things that are going in your database. And I'll repeat this probably in a couple minutes, but it's, you know, a vendor's been created, a customer's been created, a new entry's been put into the system, your customer's going over a certain balance, your vendor's going over a certain balance. Again, it's the whole notification system, all done online, emailing, getting notifications, not having to be, you know, logged into SL to see this information. What we have here is a series of time entry notifications that come from time areas. So 1, time card reminder. Maybe this is something that you set up every Wednesday, every Thursday. By the way, you know, just so you know, remember on Friday at 5 o'clock, you need to have your time. Again, it can be as detailed. This is completely editable. So this is a generic text that comes with it, but you can edit it and make it say whatever you want. The next one, time card missing. Maybe you set it up. Maybe your company and some of our people that I work with, they have to do daily time cards. If you need to do daily time cards, you can set them, hey, your time card's missing, you haven't started it. Now, it could be you haven't started, or it could be on Thursday or Friday to let them know, hey, we know that you haven't done anything yet, you need to do it. Letting you know that something got approved, your time card was approved. And the one on the right-hand side, the bigger one here, is showing you, and this is great for our approvers, is where are we at? Is the time card in process? Has it been completed? Or are they missing it? And obviously there's a lot of people missing. We want to go out and talk to them and say, hey, encourage them to move forward. But again, there's a screen that does this inside of SL. This is kind of taking the screen and moving it into email so you don't have to open up the screen. You can automatically get these emails as needed. So a great example of Power Automate and how it can work for you. And these are just some examples of how those emails can be sent to you. In addition, we did CU3, and I purposely hid them because we made some enhancements to them, but we've made some enhancements to your Power BI dashboard. So we've had a project Power BI dashboard that's been out there, and what Power BI is, for those of you not familiar, is kind of as a reporting tool that gives me a visual view into what's going on in my system. Not that transactional view, but again, the project one we've had for a long time now. One of the requests we had is it had some limitations on starting dates, ending dates, when does your period start, when does your fiscal period start, when does your fiscal period end. And when it was built multiple years ago, it had some restrictions on it that we were able to get around and make some updates on that. The next is customer dashboard. It actually came out with CU3, but no, here in CU4 we've enhanced it, and I'll show you that in a second, as well as a vendor dashboard. So let's take a look at it. So for the customer dashboard, again, it is a series. In this case, there are 5 different tabs. This tab, it's showing you top 10 customers in some graphical views. It's showing you top 10 documents by balance in a graphical view. Same with your top 10 customers by sales, your top 10 document by sales. It's showing you who these customers are in the different, in this case, it's showing me in the different databases that are companies that are out there. We're able to see things. We're looking at AR detail information, being able to drill down into those detailed documents and customer balances. We're able to see an AR aging information, seeing what the aging is for each of these different customers that are out there, as well as our sales detail. Now, again, this was available in CU3, but what we did is we made it a little more graphic, which is the whole idea around Power BI, is to give you a visual cue to like kind of grab your attention, go, oh yeah, there's something going on here that I need to do something about, and allowing you to drill into it and see the information. We did the same thing here with vendor. This is new. We have one for vendors, but it's very simple. We're going to give you some AP summary. We're looking at our vendors by balance, who has the largest balance. I think some cool things I didn't really point out on the other one, but you know, the total number of payable documents that are past due, the payables documents that are due today. So again, a great place for you to log in and kind of see what's the pulse of, in this case, in the payables, what's going on, and be able to get an idea of what's happening. Same here with our AP detail. If you need to get into more of the details of vendor balances and document balances, as well as your AP aging. So it's, again, Power BI dashboards are great, something you should definitely check out. We provide these to you for free. If you install Power BI and use the Power BI downloadable product that you run locally, it's something that you can get for free. And it's the idea behind these Power BIs is that if you like them enough and you want to start sharing with people, you can start get licensing. Licensing can be, if you have a Microsoft Office 365, and certain versions of it automatically come with licensing for Power BI and these other tools. But it's a great way to get information disseminated across your company and provide people the information they need to help do their jobs. All right, so what are we doing? So let me take a step back. So that's CU4. Lots of great things. We continue to work and are in the process on working CU5. What are in the release? New features. We have a couple new features. We're addressing a lot of fix requests. I went back through our backlog and saw a lot of little tweaks. Hey, we noticed that when you do this, or this needs to be slightly tweaked. I noticed there's a lot of those that have been sitting out there for a long time. And so I'm kind of tasking ourselves with kind of going back and addressing a lot of these small little items. They weren't huge. They weren't stopping people from working, but they were kind of like, you know, walking around with your shirt tucked in the front, but sticking out in the back, so to speak, as a boss once told me. So again, we're doing that. We're addressing those. We actually are looking for some suggestions too. We have some already for some of the new features that we have included, but I think my next one is, yes, I'm always looking for new ideas. What are those little enhancements, little tweaks? Whenever I do this presentation, this is the email address I'd love for you to contact me at. Let me know what those items are, and I'd be love to hear from you, start up a discussion with you on those, and see if these are things that we can either potentially get into CU5, that we're kind of locking things down, but we might have a little time left, or maybe push it to the next release after that. But again, those little items, are important because they makes everyone's lives a little bit easier. So I'm definitely looking forward to hearing from you. I'm looking at my time. Jeff got a little winded. I'm going to just go some of the security items. We do now support Windows Server 2019. That was with CU2. We added here with CU4. SQL Server 2019 is officially supported with this latest version, so I did want to highlight that. The same with Office 2019. So all those have been tested, so if you're on them or getting ready to upgrade them, feel confident that we can do that. I've already kind of talked about this, so I'm going to purposely skip through this. Since we really I talked a little bit more in detail on these, but I'm going to skip through these slides because I want to be able to give you guys time to ask questions. And Jeff gets excited sometimes, we all know, and loves to talk about the new features. So let's go ahead and skip by these for now. If I can get my mouse to catch up with me. All right. And let's go on to the last two items. One, again, I talked about this already, but this is just showing you, again, a feature I really think that you'll be beneficial along with Power BI and Power Apps is our Power Automate Flows emails. And again, these are just some examples of what you can do, but know that anything that happens inside of your SL database, something gets entered, something gets updated, you can get an email notification on that. So definitely think about that. Again, I'll skip by those. Web apps. We continue to build our web apps. Again, our web apps are the original way to remotely access Dynamics SL. Obviously, for our project people, it does a lot of the things that they need, anything from time entry, expense entry, setting up a project. We are continuing to release these basically once a month. Any fixes that people find, and also new small little tweaks that we get, similar to what we talked about in the Rich Client, we get those requests as well, and we continue to build them out as well. So if you have any tweaks to what you've seen or little enhancement ideas, again, we're always available to hear that. Roadmap, this is the same roadmap, whether you're here with me in the SO world and the GP world, this is kind of the generic entry here that we have here. Again, with this year, we've released SL CU4, and we've kind of showed you what's available in CU4. And then we're working on CU5. So those things, and again, getting those feature requests from you will help us get more into CU5 or potentially the further release. And the plan for next year is to continue in this process that we've been doing here with these two releases in the calendar year is the current status. And we continue to work strong and to continue to add feature functionality to SL.